Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. A couple days ago, I did a upload about a ghost town in Vermont called Glastonbury and the Bennington Triangle, along with the Bennington Triangle Monster. About 2 days ago, I received an email from Victor, and he said, check out Portlock, Alaska. And I did. Coincidentally, Portlock has pretty much the same history as Glastonbury. Very, very creepy town, and I'm going to share a lot of the history, the rumors, the folklore, and talk a little bit about the monster. Because actually, now that I think about it, this kind of just makes the Bennington Triangle, Glastonbury, and the Bennington Triangle monster look tame. So, before we get into this upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting, stories that really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may or may not like what you hear. Last, but most certainly not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those books are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? On the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula lies an abandoned ghost town called Portlock, with only a few rotting houses left of the once vibrant village. Although the Aleut people have lived on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula for thousands of years, no one had a settlement in the Portlock area until 1780s. This thriving town remained until everyone abandoned the village in the 1950s, with most residents moving to nearby villages down the coast. A mine tunnel, house pilings, and rusted cannery equipment are all that remain of Portlock. And the reason why is terrifying. An unexplained hairy creature continuously assaulted and stalked the villagers, murdering them and leaving their bodies until they finally all abandoned the area. Portlock, Alaska, lies on the southern end of the Kenai Peninsula in south-central Alaska. The village of Portlock was established when Captain Nathaniel Portlock of the Royal British Navy landed there in 1787. It was unexplored, a beautiful area filled with fish and plenty of space. Residents in the nearby villages of Seldovia, Nunwelk, and Port Graham also report that the area is haunted, including Portlock, also called Port Chatham, Chatham Bay, and Chrome, the site of the chromium mine. Portlock began to become well known as one of the creepy places in Alaska. Many are afraid to visit the area due to the unexplained circumstances that continued to happen in this small town. In 1905, it was reported that all of the workers left the cannery jobs due to something mysterious that was bothering the camp. The cannery workers returned the next season, but unexplained events were continually reported. There was an air of fear and the mystery that began to pervade the small town. Hunters and gold miners who headed into the mountains started to disappear. In 1931, one man that was chopping wood was found murdered, seemingly by a single blow that seemed stronger than a human could manage. This alarmed the townspeople. One group hunting a moose reported finding giant footprints also stalking the same animal. They arrived at the site of a bloody battle, and no moose was found. Footprints over 18 inches long headed from that spot into the foggy mountains. Occurrences like these began to show up regularly. One resident saw a huge, hairy man destroying fish wheels along the beach. He ran back to get his gun, and when he returned, the beast just stared at him and walked off. With these sightings, unease began to ramp up in the town. Bodies that were recovered, having washed down the river into the lagoon, had strange wounds no bear could make. The loss of these lives took a toll on the small community, and fear set in. People started to leave. With unexplained disappearances and murders, no one felt they could take a chance and continue to live there. Residents took off in a mass in 1949, leaving their homes, the nearby chromium mine, the cannery, the teacher's cottage, a large schoolhouse to return to the wilderness. This left Portlock as an abandoned town in Alaska, and one many people never wanted to return to. Only the postmaster remained. After a year alone, the post office closed in 1950, and the last resident of Portlock left town. Even the postmaster couldn't continue on in this town. This town experienced over 50 years of hauntings, murders, and disappearances before the townspeople gave in and left. In the local dialect of Alunique, a language of the area, the creature is called Nandina, half man, half beast. In the 1970s, fishermen forced to take refuge from a storm reported something strange walked through their camp on 2 feet. It terrified them, and they left as soon as possible. 70 years after the hauntings started, they were still continuing when people visited the area. The ghost town of Portlock, Alaska, has a mysterious story. Whether or not this is a stronghold of Bigfoot in Alaska, you can decide for yourself. The disappearances and the bodies found were too horrible for anyone to continue living in this small town. Port Chatham, a bay on the southern tip of the Kenai, and a former village of the same name, hardly seems like a setting for inexplicable terror and fright, but a series of mysterious disappearances and death, where the Kenai Mountain narrows before plunging into the North Pacific, gave birth to rumors that began in the 1930s and continue to this very day. And the rumors all point to the same thing. Something's not right around Port Chatham. Take, for instance, Andrew Camlock, who had gone out logging in 1931. He was found dead in the woods from a blow to the head. A piece of logging equipment nearby may have been used as a weapon. Around the same time, Elder Simon Kresnikoff of nearby Port Graham, present-day Nanowellick, said that the gold miner headed out for a day and just disappeared. No sign of the prospector was ever found. Sometime later, Tom Larson went out to chop wood for fish traps when he saw something large and hairy on the beach. He ran back home for his rifle, and when he returned to the water's edge, this creature just stared at him. Larson never could explain why he didn't fire. Then in 1973, an Anchorage newspaper ran a piece on a retired school teacher who had taught in Port Chatham during World War II. She told of cannery workers who went into the mountains to hunt Dall sheep and bear, but never returned. Search parties found no trace of them. Then rumors spread that a mutilated body torn and dismembered in a fashion that did not resemble wounds from a bear attack, had been swept by the rains down off the mountain into a lagoon. Other rumors include specifics of the beast's features. Hunters, following signs of a moose, came across man-like footprints that exceeded 18 inches in length. As they closed in on the moose, they realized that they and the owner of the big feet were tracking the same animal. The hunters soon came across matted down grass that held indication of an apparent life and death struggle. Beyond the grass, the hunters found no moose track, but the large man-like footprints continued upward into the cloud-draped mountains. The history of the human habitation around Port Chatham is relatively short, even though the crock of her sheltered bay offers protection from the turbulent ocean. Captain Nathaniel Portlock, a member of the British Royal Navy, found sanctuary here in 1786 during his Alaskan expedition and praised the site. Around 1900, an American firm brought in a fleet of fishing boats and built a cannery to take advantage of the calm waters and the healthy run of salmon. The Russian Alonik village of Port Chatham grew around the cannery, and by all accounts, it was quaint, tidy, and a beautiful setting nestled between the sea and the vistas of snow-covered peaks. By 1921, residents established a post office. In an interview that ran in October of 2009 edition of the Homer Tribune, Nana Welk Elder, Melina Helen Kell, who was born in Port Chatham in 1934, gave insight into the demise of her hometown. She explained that her parents, along with the rest of the village, grew weary of being terrorized by a creature the Alunik called the Nandina, half man, half beast. Said that many residents refused to venture into the surrounding forests and over time abandoned their homes and the village school and moved up the coast to Port Graham. Only the postmaster remained in Port Chatham, but the post office closed in 1950. Earlier records made by Portlock Cannery Management showed that the site had been vacated once before. The cannery supervisor noted in 1905 that all the native workers evacuated the area because of something in the forest, but they returned to work at the cannery the following year. The stories did not stop with the abandonment of the village. A goat hunter in 1968 claimed to have been chased by a creature while he was hunting in the area. In 1973, 3 hunters took shelter during a 3-day storm and claimed that each night something walked around their tent on what sounded like 2 feet. In 1990, an Anchorage paramedic was called out to aid a 70-year-old native who had suffered a heart attack, but was incarcerated in the Eagle River Jail north of the city. While treating a man, a paramedic happened to mention he had hunted in the area of Port Chatham. The elderly man suddenly sat up, grabbed the medic by the shirt, and asked, "Did it bother you? Did you see it?" This is a recount of that last part of the story. I don't belong to any UFO group or anything like that, but this actually happened to me. I've told a few trusted friends about it, but never bothered to write it down. I'll try to relate it as accurately to memory allows. In 1990, while working as a paramedic in Anchorage, we got a call out on an alarm for a man having a heart attack at a state jail in Eagle River. He was a native man in his 70s, and after I got him stabilized with IVs, O2, and cardiac drugs, my partner and I began to transport him to the native hospital in Anchorage. En route to the hospital, I had time to talk to this gentleman, who was a loot from the native village of Port Graham, a remote village on the lower end of the Cook Inlet. Well, as usual with me, the topic eventually drifted to hunting and fishing, and I casually mentioned to him that I and two other hunting buddies were once weathered in at the upper lagoon at Dogfish Bay, only a few miles from his home in Port Graham. The lagoon was about as beautiful and wild a place as I had ever seen in my 35 years in Alaska. Well, when I said that I had spent some time in Dogfish, this old man sat up on the gurney and grabbed me by the front of my shirt. He got right up to my face and said, "Did it bother you?" Well, with that question, the hair stood up on the back of my head. I said, "Yes." "Did you see it?" was his next question. I said, "No." "Did you see it?" He said, "No, but my brother seen it. It chased him." This old Alut and I were talking about the same thing, but we never used the word Bigfoot or legend or anything like that. But we both knew what we were talking about. You see, in August of '73, 3 of us were bow hunting for goat and blackies in what was then the remote wilderness of the lower Cook Inlet, when a storm forced us to take shelter in Dogfish Bay Lagoon. We beached our skiff and let the tide run her dry. After a dinner of broiled salmon, we turned to our tent. Back in those days, the best tent I had was a dark green canvas job with a center pole, no windows or floor. We left the fire burning and cleaned the pots and pans so as not to attract bears during the night and turned in. The sky was clear, but the wind was howling through the old-growth timber that lined the shore. Sometime around 2 a.m, my friend Dennis woke me by squeezing my leg. I could dimly see his face in the tent. His finger was across his lips. I listened, then I heard it. A step. A man was quietly walking outside of our tent, taking very deliberate steps. Not a bear. Scenes from the movie Deliverance flashed through my mind. We woke up Joe, the 3rd member of our party, with the same leg grab and finger to the lips. The walking, or rather sneaking, continued until half circled our tent. Then all went quiet except for the wind. We had our bows and the .06 leaning against a tree outside of the tent, so somehow we talked Joe into belly crawling out the tent to get the rifle. We were scared shitless, I tell ya. The next day, the night of the storm continued to blow. We saw several black bear on the salmon stream at the head of the lagoon during the evening hunt, but had no chance for a shot. We didn't talk about what happened that night. Too embarrassed, I guess, to be scared by a black bear that sounded like a man. We got back to camp early, built a big fire, and sat around it. Ate dinner until around midnight. In August, there is still some light in the sky until about 10 or 11. I recall that we were all embarrassed about being afraid about coming of night. We had a flashlight and the rifle in the tent between us, locked and loaded. I finally dozed off but woke right up when Dennis squeezed my leg. The illuminated hands on my watch showed 2:30. Joe was already sitting up and had the rifle in hand. I heard the first step, not more than 10 feet from the back of the tent. Slowly, then another, and another. Whatever this was, it sounded like it was walking on 2 feet. It made the same semicircle around the tent. When we finally got enough courage to crawl out of the tent and turn the flashlight on, we saw nothing. No tracks, nothing. The 3rd night, we decided if it bothered us again, we would come out of the tent shooting. We were actually scared. It never came back the 3rd night, and the following day, we had a break in the weather and got the heck out of there. Never told anybody about this experience for several years until about 1979, when I happened to be reading an old Alaskan sportsman magazine published in 1935. In the letters to the editor, a woman wrote that she recently found a letter written by some distant relative of hers who was a school teacher at the cannery in Portlock Bay. The year was 1905. She quoted from the letter. It said that the cannery employed a small group of Aleut from the small village of Portlock Bay during salmon season. Their camp was about a mile from the cannery buildings. One day all the Aleut moved out of the village and paddled their bidarks back to Port Graham. The letter said that the Aleut claimed that a hairy man was bothering and frightened them to the point where they had to leave. I have since done some research into the subject and found written histories of natives from Seldovia to Port Graham being frightened and bothered by something. They even have a name for it. It doesn't translate into English very well. Quickly, the word is Nandina, which is spelled very strangely. It's Nantiinaq. These accounts mostly take place during the first half of the 1900s and are native related, but not all. I talked to one white guy who in 1968 got the heebie-jeebies scared out of him while coming down an alder-choked gully while on a goat hunt in Portlock, Alaska. Most of these accounts precede the Bigfoot hype that began to appear in the 60s and 70s in the Northwest. Well, anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So that's some history of Portlock, Alaska, and ironically enough, funny enough, Victor usually calls or texts me, but he emailed me this message, and it just said, research Portlock, Alaska. We should go up there this summer. So I emailed him back, and I said, I'm going to be doing an upload on this, and I will give you a call later on in the day afterward. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy story. I mean, jumping Jehovah's, it's terrifying. This creature was like literally ripping people apart and leaving their dead bodies everywhere. What's crazy enough is Victor emailing me. I mean, like I said, he usually texts or calls me, and this must have been important that he wanted to email me to kind of light a fire under my butt to get looking into it. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this very, very strange history lesson in a very creepy ghost town in Alaska named Portlock. With that, I'm going to bid y'all farewell, and I hope you guys stay safe. We're in the middle of a winter snowstorm in upstate New York today, so it's actually started about 11 o'clock this morning, and it's not supposed to end until about 7 tomorrow night. Yay. Have a good night, guys. See ya.